Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and I'm the airline pilot who used to fly Boeing 737. So today is the new update on Air India crash, and here I'm gonna take some other opinions from the people whom I respect out there in internet. Aviation experts and pilots, those who can judge the situation on the evidence we now currently have. The evidence is not that much, but still we have some of the clues of what might happen out there. For example, let's speak about the ram air turbine. Over here I also mentioned it in one of my videos. It's just a small engine generator which produces hydraulic pressure and the electricity as the backup source if you lose your main generators or hydraulics. This is the feature of Boeing 787. And here John Brown from the Blancaleria channel really said the possible thing that could happen. So let's listen to the sound. Over here he presents the video of the American Airlines Boeing 787, which was filmed by spotters, and listen to the sound. So it's like, again, I told you in one of my videos, it's like a piston engine sound. And now let's listen to the sound of the airplane of Air India, which was passing by, and it was recorded by the eyewitness. Let's listen to it. Almost exactly the same sound, or maybe exactly the same sound. Before I thought that those could be some of the road sounds, but it almost fits exactly this red ram air turbine sound, then it works.
That's the sound of the ram air turbine.
So I also agree with John Brown here after his analysis, because before I watched the video which was filmed from the monitor, and there is one more video published, so definitely I guess it is the sound of ram air turbine. I'm 99% sure about it. So what are the cases then ram air turbine works? Because after all it's the backup source and it is being deployed after you have some of the major failure of your main systems.
First is the traditional one, dual engine failure. Makes sense. If you have dual engine failure, you're going to automatically deploy the RAT.
So then you have no thrust, you don't have the engine-driven generators, and you don't have the engine-driven hydraulic pumps. So to maintain the pressure in your hydraulic system, to basically control the airplane and to electrically supply the fly-by-wire system of this sophisticated airplane, you need at least some source, and that source is ram air turbine. So if you have both engines failure. However, it's not the only case. Then the RAT is being deployed. We're gonna discuss it just a little later. For now, I'm gonna show you it again, that Aviation Commission thinks that likelihood of pilot error as well as the simultaneous failure of both of the engines is considered minimal. So it's like that written here. It's minimal, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't like that. Maybe it was the case. For now, they don't know. They just consider likelihood minimal. So let's go back to RAT, both engines failure. What else? John Brown will tell us.
Low pressure in all three hydraulic systems. If you lose hydraulics, all three hydraulic systems, you're going to get the RAT.
So possible problem with hydraulic system as well. The loss of pressure is either you lose all of the engine-driven and electrically driven pumps, or you have the hydraulic system leakage with three of the independent systems. I don't think it's really the case, but yeah, who knows? The investigation is still ongoing.
Loss of all electrical power to the captains and first officers' flight instruments.
One more condition, and it is kind of important because Boeing 787, before it got some of the issues with the battery is installed in the electronic compartment. There were the cases with battery fire even. Luckily it happened on the ground. After it there was the directive, the maintenance was done, but if the electronic compartment is being destroyed by, for example, battery runaway, fire, it definitely could cause the significant problem with everything out there.
Again, the 787 is an electro-hydraulic jet. It needs this electric and hydraulic power in order to continue to operate it. So a loss of all electrical power to the captains and first officers' flight instruments will automatically deploy the RAT. A loss of all four electric motor pumps and flight control system faults during approach. All four electric motor pumps.
But it's during approach, so it's not our case, it was the takeoff of the airplane.
Also, this odd combination here, a loss of all four electric motor pumps of the hydraulic system, as discussed earlier, and an engine failure on takeoff.
This is the condition that probably occurred. At least it is referred to takeoff. So if you have the single engine failure and the loss of all of the electrical hydraulic pumps, you'll have the red activated.
So because it's becoming more apparent that this rat was in fact deployed in this takeoff crash, this tells me that this is going to be a much more complicated accident investigation.
Yeah, for me, it also, because for now there are just random clues. Some of the eyewitnesses filmed the video, CCTV camera, but luckily now we have the flight data recorder, we have the cockpit voice recorder. I'm sure that they recorded everything, and I don't think that it's gonna be like huge mystery after a couple of weeks. Then the flight data recorder will be decoded, because you still need some time for it, for analysis, for putting all of the data together with the cockpit voice recorder. It's like the construction, the simulation of this flight. And before that moment, we're just discussing the possible versions of why it could happen. I do not honestly consider it as the speculation, it's the expert mark of the events which happened, because in internet there are lots of the lies about this aviation accident, like involving some of the politics, Pakistan is shut down this airplane or something like that. No, it wasn't the case. That the airplane is shut down, it's shut down like it happened with Azerbaijani Embraer 190. I also discussed this case, so there is the real evidence happened right away with those pictures showing shrapnel. Here we have tons of the videos showing completely different history and the nature of this disaster. So even though for now we don't know the main cause of the crash, but we are trying to come out with the versions that are more or less closer to the real things. So for now I tend to agree with John Brown, with some other experts out there in internet, that probably there was some of the issue with at least one of the engines on takeoff, and that caused the deployment of the ram air turbine. And guys, I highly recommend to check out John's video. The channel's name is Blancaleria. I'll put the link right in the video description below. He does lots of the analysis of the different aviation incidents, accidents in general aviation, in commercial aviation, and he is the pilot of the wide-body jet himself, Boeing pilot. I personally subscribe for him and I watch him all the time. And there are different aviation enthusiasts out there in internet who try to dig the real reason what happened. For example, Swiss 001, he mentioned the unnatural position of the landing gear of this airplane. Let's watch this.
When 787 landing gear retracts. Wait for it. Gear selected up, takes a bit of a while, and gears tilted forward as much as the landing gear door opens. And this is very interesting information. Why?
So before retraction, it tilted forward at first, and then the door is fully open and they go sideways, the landing gear. That's the usual thing for the landing gear, then you select it up.
My hypothesis is that the landing gear was actually set to the up position, but during the retraction of the landing gear, the plane lost hydraulic power. Now,
could be, you see. It seems like the landing gear was commanded for retraction because the position was already tilted down. You may see even on this poor quality video, those huge landing gear carriages that tilted down.
The major way for that to happen is through a dual engine failure. Now, why is this important? Because it helps us answer the question of when these engines failed. For example,
well, he tends to say that there was the Boss engine's failure, but I'm not sure about this for now, my friends. But at least there was significant problem with the thrust of the engines, probably dual engine failure, maybe single engine failure with hydraulic pumps issue that caused the ram air turbine to deploy. But the main thing is the engine thrust, what kind of the thrust was produced out there, what caused the engines to maybe even spool down or shut down. For now, this information is only accessible to DGCA, and they still investigating this aviation accident. Well, one more remark: if they find something really significant that could influence potentially other airplanes, they'll file out the bulletin for all of the Boeing 787s. Like it happened, for example, with Boeing 737 MAX cases, then there was the bulletin after the first aviation accident. It was applied to all of the Boeing 737 MAX airplanes. However, later on, one more crash happened and all of the airplanes were grounded for many months. By the way, our airline also ordered Boeing 737 MAX airplanes, but later on refused to take those. Yeah, I'm gonna also put the link for the channel of Swiss001 because sometimes his content is very interesting, entertaining, but this time it's kind of serious. And you might find some of the interesting remarks from him as well. But basically, all of the aviation experts, they are saying the similar stuff out there. Again, for the grainy video which was shown, guys, it's hard to judge whether there is the ram air turbine deployed. I mean, visually it's hard to judge, and we heard just the sound of the ram air turbine working, but the sound could be enough to determine whether it is definitely ram air turbine. I think it was red. About the possible fuel contamination, there was the case, and Swiss001 mentioned that the Cathay Pacific flight 780, it lost both of the engines after departure. It was the Airbus A330. Luckily, the altitude was okay to restart one of the engines, and they landed safely at the airport of origin, I guess. Engine failure due to fuel contamination. It could be one of the possible reasons, guys, because it happened in Hong Kong International, by the way, a relatively not long time ago in 2010, so I guess it could happen elsewhere. I think it was the water contamination, which could actually be out there in the fuel tanks because of the condensation inside. Under some certain conditions, it could be. That's why regular maintenance is very important to be conducted on the airplanes, to check out fuel pipes, even conditions of the fuel tanks. And it also depends on the refueling system, refueling track, or the underground system. My subscribers also sent me this screenshot showing that there is some sort of the shadow on both of the wings. Seems to be like the deployment of the spoilers. The spoilers are out there to kill the lift. Well, judging on this image, it definitely looks like the deployment of the spoilers, which is very strange as for me. But again, guys, the video is very grainy. It is shaky. So, for example, here I can say that maybe there is the aileron deflection with some of the shadow here. I hope you can see it. And here, like the forward part of the wing is separated. And here we have some of the small shadows. So, yeah, they took the screenshot just from this grainy image. Now I don't see the spoiler deflection. So, it's not constant. The spoilers, I guess, were down. And it's just the failure of this image. Here you can definitely see that the spoilers are down. It's just the problem with the image itself. I honestly would like to access the original file of the video, but anyways, in a few weeks we're gonna know why it happened. We're gonna know the main cause of this crash, so just need to wait and check out the official information that will be published by Indian investigation team. They are working out there, I believe, very hard, and maybe they're already decoding the flight data recorder together with the cockpit voice recorder, so they will publish all of the information. And yes, at first it's not always understandable what caused the major aviation accidents. As for example, with Jeju Air, we understand that there was the bird strike which led to this disaster and the poor construction of the airfield with this antenna, basically a huge wall that stopped the aircraft right away. The aircraft landed without landing gear, hitting the wall. But what were the actions of the crew? Unfortunately, for now, it is not understandable and probably will never be, because this is the very poor design of the flight data recorder that was installed on Boeing 737NG, unlike on Boeing 787. So with 787, with Air India crash, I am sure that all of the data was recorded, even in case of the dual engine failure. But on 737, this modification, this, by the way, aircraft I used to fly, Boeing 737NG, if you lose two of the engines or two of the generators, from what I understood, basically the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, they stop working, which is crazy as for me. So you don't know all of the data. In Air India will know it. And according to the recent information, guys, unfortunately the number of the fatalities has been increased. I mean, fatalities on the ground. So before there was the report about 8, I think, fatalities. Now the number is 33. It's huge. The recovery work is still underway. Both flight data, cockpit voice recorder, as well as the ELT, emergency locator transmitter, were recovered from the crash site. They do not specify the condition of those black boxes, but I think they're in good condition because the tail part of the airplane, the very tail, survived, and usually flight data recorder at least is located behind. Other than that, there is no new data coming on Aviation Herald website, but nevertheless it's better to follow it because every new updates are published there. We also have the information on the Aviation Safety Network about the aircraft, but here's less data, just general analysis of the case. Yeah, also weather information and some of the videos, photos and so on. This is the chart itself, the map. My friends, thank you so much for continuing watching my updates, and then there will be some of the new information coming. I'm gonna update you right away because this case is very important for us to learn, for it not to happen once again, and it all depends now on investigation team because they have all the possible information. They know much more than we are. Again guys, the links for the expert opinion of people whom I usually watch I put in the video description just below. Thank you again for watching. Ciao.